On the outskirts of Aspen, Colorado, December 1993, snowflakes drifted down gently, blanketing the grand Victorian mansion in a soft, white veil. 8-year-old Abigail Sterling sat by her second-floor bedroom window, her wide eyes drawn to the tranquil winter landscape outside. Christmas was only 2 days away, but her heart felt distant from the holiday cheer. Downstairs, a magnificent Christmas tree twinkled with lights and ornaments, yet Abigail couldn't recall the last time her family had decorated it together. Her room, much like the rest of the house, was a testament to her mother Elizabeth's exquisite, but impersonal, taste. The walls were lined with expensive paintings, and antique furniture filled every corner, leaving little room for the whims of a child. The only item that brought any comfort to Abigail was a well-worn teddy bear resting on her bed, its fur fraying at the edges. "Miss Abigail, I brought you some hot chocolate," came the soft voice of Mary Foster, the maid. Abigail turned, her face brightening at the sight of Mary. The woman, in her mid-50s with neat gray hair and a perfectly pressed uniform, was the only one who showed the girl any affection in this sterile, distant home. Mary placed the steaming mug on the nightstand, her smile warm and sincere, a contrast to the coldness that seemed to permeate the mansion. "Thank you, Mary," Abigail said softly, wrapping her hands around the mug, savoring its warmth. From downstairs, her mother's laughter echoed through the house, light and airy, a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped Abigail's room. "Oh yes, I'll definitely attend the party," Elizabeth's voice floated up, clear and precise. "I'll wear my new Chanel. Mrs. Lauren will be there, and you know how important appearances are." Abigail sighed, her gaze turning back to the window. To her parents, appearances were everything. Her father, Jonathan, a high-powered executive, and her mother, a fixture in Aspen's elite social circles, rarely took time for their daughter. The Sterling name graced society pages, but the picture of family unity was just that, a picture. Behind the glossy surface, there was a different story. Mary, noticing the sorrowful look on Abigail's face, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Would you like to make a gingerbread house with me tomorrow?" she asked, her voice soft and reassuring. "We had such fun last year, remember?" Abigail's eyes brightened at the suggestion. Last Christmas, while her parents had vacationed in Hawaii, Mary had helped her create a gingerbread house, and the memory was one of the few moments of genuine happiness she held on to. But this year, neither of them knew that darker days were approaching, and the once stable world of the Sterling family was beginning to crack. The signs were already there. Each night, muffled shouting seeped from Jonathan's study, the thick door doing little to hide the rising tension within. "What do you mean the deadline has passed?" Jonathan's voice, strained and desperate, carried through the walls. His study was a chaotic mess of overdue bills and red-stamped collection notices. A failed real estate investment in the wake of the Lehman crash had left Jonathan drowning in a $3 million debt. His attempts to redevelop a promising property had spiraled into financial disaster, and the collectors were relentless. Meanwhile, Elizabeth retreated further into her world of excess, seeking solace in shopping sprees that only deepened the hole they were in. Her dressing room overflowed with furs, designer dresses, and jewelry, many with the price tags still attached. Credit card bills accumulated unchecked, their unpaid balance growing with each passing day. The once grand household was beginning to unravel. The staff had mostly deserted, abandoning their posts over unpaid wages, leaving only the cook and Mary behind. Mary, out of a deep sense of loyalty to Abigail. "That child is innocent," Mary murmured to the cook one evening as she wiped down the counter. "She's the only light left in this house." But even Mary's presence couldn't shield Abigail from the growing darkness that loomed over her family. One night, as the house settled into an eerie quiet, Abigail tiptoed down the hallway. She paused outside her parents' bedroom, where hushed voices carried through the crack in the door. $5 million. That would solve everything. Jonathan's voice was low, tinged with desperation. "Could we really?" Her mother's voice wavered, uncertainty threading through the words. "We have no choice," Jonathan interrupted, his tone sharp. "If we don't have $1 million by the end of the week, it's over." Abigail, still too young to understand the full weight of their conversation, could feel the tension hanging in the air, a coldness that chilled her to the bone. The sounds of their voices, tight with fear, made her stomach turn. After that night, her dreams turned darker, filled with shadows and distant whispers. Then, on December 22, Jonathan made an unexpected announcement. A family outing to the Rocky Mountains. That's right, Abigail. A surprise for you, he said, his voice strained, as if the words didn't come easily. His smile was tight, and his eyes, those cold, empty eyes, set her nerves on edge. Elizabeth, with her usual polished demeanor, handed Abigail a new camera. "This will make wonderful memories," she said, her cheerfulness forced, as if the words didn't quite match the look in her eyes. Abigail didn't know it at the time, but those seemingly innocent words hid a cruel plan. December 23, 1993, 7:15 a.m. The first light of dawn spread slowly across the snow-covered peaks of Rocky Mountain National Park. A black Mercedes-Benz glided along the icy road, its occupants unusually quiet, their faces hidden behind layers of emotion. Jonathan drove, his knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Elizabeth, wrapped in a new mink coat, shivered despite the car's warmth, her gaze fixed on the road ahead, unseeing. "Aren't you cold, Mother?" Abigail asked from the back seat, her voice muffled by the scarf Mary had knitted for her the night before. Elizabeth didn't answer. Her trembling hands clutched the dashboard, her eyes distant as the car wound its way up toward the summit of Flat Top Mountain. Abigail's innocent question hung in the cold air, unanswered, swallowed by the growing silence between them. On the outskirts of Whistler, British Columbia, December 1994. Snowflakes drifted gently over the sprawling Victorian-style chalet, coating the garden in a pristine layer of white. 8-year-old Abigail Sterling sat by her second-floor bedroom window, her wide eyes fixed on the peaceful winter landscape. Christmas was only 2 days away, but the holiday felt distant. Downstairs, a grand Christmas tree glittered with lights and ornaments, but Abigail had no memories of decorating it as a family. Her room, much like the rest of the house, reflected her mother Elizabeth's immaculate, but impersonal, taste. Expensive paintings adorned the walls, and antique furniture crowded the space, leaving little room for a child's creativity to take root. The only comfort Abigail found was a worn teddy bear lying on her bed, its fur threadbare from years of affection. "Miss Abigail, I brought you some hot chocolate," came the soft voice of Mary Foster, the maid. Abigail turned, her face lighting up. Mary, a woman in her mid-50s, with neatly styled gray hair and a perfectly pressed uniform, was the only person in the house who offered her any warmth. With quiet dignity, she placed the tray on Abigail's nightstand, her gentle smile a rare source of comfort in the cold, distant chalet. "Thank you, Mary," Abigail said, wrapping her small hands around the mug, grateful for the warmth. From downstairs, her mother's laughter rang out, light and musical, but starkly different from the girl's own solitude. "Oh yes, I'll definitely attend the party," Elizabeth's voice drifted up, clear and confident. "I'll wear my new Dior. Mrs. Lauren will be there, so appearances are everything." Abigail sighed. For her parents, appearances were everything. Her father, Jonathan, was an executive at a prominent Vancouver investment firm, while her mother moved in the circles of Whistler's wealthy elite. Time with Abigail seemed to be an afterthought in their tireless pursuit of social status. The sterling name graced society pages, but behind the glossy facade, the reality was far less perfect. Noticing the faraway look in Abigail's eyes, Mary placed a comforting hand on the girl's shoulder. "Would you like to make a gingerbread house with me tomorrow?" she asked, her voice soft and kind. "We had such fun last Christmas, remember?" Abigail's eyes brightened at the memory. Last Christmas, when her parents had been vacationing in Bora Bora, Mary had helped her create a gingerbread house, one of her few cherished memories. But this year, neither she nor Mary could foresee the dark clouds creeping closer, threatening to engulf the Sterling family. The signs were already there. Every night, muffled shouting echoed from Jonathan's study, the heavy door doing little to shield the house from the rising tension. "What do you mean the deadline has passed?" Jonathan's voice, strained and desperate, carried through the walls. His study was a chaotic mess of unpaid bills and red-stamped collection notices. A failed real estate investment after the COVID-19 market crash had left Jonathan with a $3 million debt. His attempt to redevelop a promising property in Vancouver had spiraled into financial ruin, and the debt collectors were relentless. Meanwhile, Elizabeth buried herself deeper in excess. Her shopping sprees became a desperate escape from the looming disaster. Her dressing room overflowed with fur coats, couture dresses, and jewelry, many still with the price tags attached. The credit card bills piled up higher each day, left unchecked and unpaid. The once grand household began to crumble. Most of the staff had quit over unpaid wages, leaving only the cook and Mary, who stayed out of loyalty to Abigail. "That child is innocent," Mary confided to the cook one evening, her voice filled with concern. "She's the only light in this house." One night, Abigail overheard a hushed argument as she crept down the hallway. $5 million. That would solve everything. Jonathan's voice was urgent, laced with panic. "Could we really?" Her mother's voice trembled, uncertainty making her words falter. "We have no choice," Jonathan snapped. "If we don't have $1 million by the end of the week, it's over." Abigail didn't fully understand what they were discussing, but the fear in their voices seeped into her chest, leaving a knot of unease. Her nightmares grew worse after that night, darker, more vivid. Then, on December 22nd, Jonathan suddenly announced a family outing to the Rocky Mountains. "That's right, Abigail, a surprise for you," he said, his voice forced, a hollow smile stretching across his face. Elizabeth handed Abigail a new camera with an overly bright cheerfulness. "This will make wonderful memories," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Abigail didn't realize it yet, but those words concealed a much darker intent. December 23, 1994, 7:15 a.m. The first light of day broke over the snow-capped peaks of Garibaldi Provincial Park, casting a soft glow over the frozen landscape. A black Tesla glided along the icy mountain roads, its occupants unusually silent. Jonathan sat behind the wheel, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were pale. Elizabeth, bundled in a luxurious new mink coat, shivered despite the warmth emanating from the car's heater. "Aren't you cold, Mother?" Abigail's voice, muffled by the thick scarf Mary had knitted for her the night before, broke the stillness from the back seat. Elizabeth didn't respond. Her hands, shaking, clutched the dashboard as the car continued its ascent toward the summit of Panorama Ridge. Abigail's innocent question hung in the cold air, unanswered. "We'll see a beautiful view," Jonathan finally spoke, his voice strangely bright. His knuckles remained clenched, betraying the tension that clung to him. "You can take some sunrise photos." The car wound its way up the mountain road, tires crunching through layers of snow. Abigail held her new camera carefully, a top-of-the-line model with anti-fog coating, high-sensitivity film, and fresh batteries. It was the perfect tool for capturing memories, but Abigail couldn't shake the unease gnawing at her. By 8:30 a.m., they reached a secluded observation point about 3,000 meters above sea level. The parking lot was empty, the vast, snowy expanse eerily silent. Stepping into the bitter cold, the Sterlings huddled near the car, their breath misting in the frosty air. "There's a scenic spot this way," Jonathan said, consulting a map, his tone steady as he led them toward a narrow, unmarked trail. He ignored the no-entry signs along the path, and Elizabeth followed without a word, her fur-lined coat trailing behind her in the snow. "Dad, isn't this dangerous?" Abigail asked hesitantly, looking at the steep drop beside the path. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Jonathan replied, his voice cold, echoing against the mountain. "You're a special girl." They reached a precarious outcropping, where a deep canyon yawned below, its bottom hidden by shadows and snow. The icy wind held around them, carrying with it a palpable sense of dread. "Let's take a photo here," Jonathan said, offering the camera to Abigail. "I'll take it. Move a little closer to the edge." Abigail hesitated, but then, trusting her father's instructions, she slowly inched forward, her boots crunching in the snow. The wind bit at her cheeks as she stood on the edge, peering down into the void below. Behind her, Elizabeth stood several meters back, her face turned away, her eyes distant. That was when Abigail noticed it, the emptiness in her father's eyes. It wasn't love, it wasn't pride, it was something colder, more detached. "You're worthless," Jonathan said flatly, his voice devoid of emotion, "but this will solve everything." Before Abigail could process the words, he shoved her. The ground disappeared beneath her feet, and she tumbled forward, her body hurtling toward the snow-covered abyss. Her mother's scream pierced the air, but it felt distant, hollow, as though it came from another world. Time stretched, and Abigail's mind raced, flashing through fragments of memories, the gingerbread house she'd promised Mary, the life she would never return to. She tried to scream, but her mouth was frozen, her body weightless. Her fall was finally halted by a thick thicket of shrubs some 30 meters below, but the impact left her battered and bruised. The camera, hanging from her neck, caught on a rock, jerking her to a sudden stop. The shutter clicked, its sound muffled in the vast canyon. The camera's flash fired repeatedly in the dim light, as if calling out in silent desperation. As Abigail's consciousness faded, the faint, rhythmic click of the camera's shutter was the last sound she heard, her only cry for help. 9:10 a.m. Park Ranger Tom Wilson scanned the landscape from the observation point, his eyes narrowing at a faint flash of light across the snow-covered expanse. "Martha," he called to his wife, his instincts alert, "there's something flashing over there." Martha, his partner on patrol, followed his gaze. "Could it be a person?" she asked, a note of concern in her voice. The rescue was grueling. The steep slopes and freezing temperatures made each step treacherous. Using safety ropes, the Wilsons carefully descended into the canyon. When they found Abigail, she was barely alive, her small body battered and motionless, her skin pale and cold. "She has a pulse," Martha shouted, her voice filled with relief, "but she's freezing." Tom immediately radioed for a helicopter rescue. For the 15 minutes it took for the medics to arrive, Martha cradled Abigail against her body, desperately trying to keep her warm in the biting cold. At Whistler General Hospital, doctors worked frantically to stabilize Abigail. Her injuries were extensive, multiple fractures in her right arm and leg, severe hypothermia, and bruises covering much of her body, but the psychological wounds ran even deeper. As the medical team worked, the initial police investigation began. Jonathan claimed Abigail had fallen while attempting to take a photo, but something about his explanation raised suspicion in the detective's mind. There were no eyewitnesses, no concrete evidence, and Abigail was in no condition to testify. 48 hours later, Jonathan and Elizabeth Sterling had disappeared without a trace. Their lavish chalet sat abandoned, the property swarming with debt collectors, yet the couple was nowhere to be found. January 1994. Snow continued to blanket the world outside Abigail's hospital room, its frozen quietness mirroring the stillness in her heart. Her recovery was slow, both physically and emotionally. Days blurred together as she stared out the window, unable to piece together the fragmented memories of that fateful day. The only thing she could hold on to with any clarity were her father's final words. "You're worthless." Those words, harsh and empty, became a dark shadow in her life, an echo that reverberated through the years that followed. The sting of rejection and betrayal by the two people who should have loved her most became the lens through which Abigail saw the world for a long time. Martha Wilson, a park ranger who had been the first to find Abigail, visited her hospital room daily. Her gentle presence became Abigail's lifeline, a small but persistent light in the unrelenting darkness. With a warm smile, Martha would ask, "Shall we get some fresh air today?" The offer of a moment of peace, of anything normal, was a balm for Abigail's fractured soul. At 52, Martha had no children of her own, but she and her husband, Tom, had already begun the legal process to become Abigail's foster parents. Every visit was a reminder that, though Abigail had been betrayed by those who should have cared for her, there were still people who saw her worth. One day, Martha sat beside her, holding Abigail's small, trembling hand in her own. "We've applied to take you home with us, if you'd like," she said softly, her voice warm and soothing. The words, though kind, hit Abigail like a wave. Her heart was heavy with grief, but in Martha's embrace, a tiny seed of hope began to sprout, a hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find a place where she truly belonged. The Wilsons' home was a modest, single-story cabin on the outskirts of Whistler, surrounded by towering evergreens. Abigail's room was already ready, a spacious sanctuary with bookshelves lining the walls, a sewing corner for creative projects, and a window offering a breathtaking view of the mountains. It was the kind of room a child could dream in, a stark contrast to the cold, oppressive mansion she'd left behind. Martha, a former luxury buyer from New York, had traded her high-powered career for the peace of mountain life years ago. Along with Tom, she was determined to give Abigail the warmth and stability she had always deserved, far from the cold, calculating world she had once known. Martha gently stroked Abigail's hair as she shared a memory. "I moved here with Tom to work as a park ranger," she said, her voice filled with nostalgia. "But even now, I still hold on to my passion for fashion. You know, when I was younger, I dreamed of starting my own design line. Life just led me in different directions." Abigail listened quietly, a spark of curiosity kindling within her. Little did she know, this spark would soon ignite a passion that would change her life. By spring 2024, Abigail began to settle into her new life with the Wilsons. Healing, however, was not quick. Nightmares still haunted her sleep, and waves of anxiety would often grip her. leaving her trembling and unsure, but Martha and Tom were steadfast, watching over her recovery with infinite patience and love. No one is worthless, Martha often reminded her. You have unlimited potential. You can become anything you set your mind to. Abigail's healing journey wasn't a straight path, but Martha's consistent care and the quiet stability of the Wilsons' home allowed her to begin piecing herself back together. Twice-weekly counseling sessions and monthly psychiatric appointments became part of her routine, but Abigail discovered an unexpected sanctuary: Martha's sewing room. "This fabric is lovely," Martha would say, her eyes lighting up as she showed Abigail various materials and vintage dresses from her collection. "Feel the silk, it's so soft, like a dream." Abigail, in turn, began to find solace in the act of creating. Her hands, once shaken by fear and trauma, now felt steady as she began to learn the craft of sewing. Martha, patient and kind, taught her everything, from basic stitching to more advanced techniques. With each dress they remade together, Abigail began to rebuild not just fabric, but the broken pieces of herself. On her 13th birthday, Abigail received a gift that would prove transformative: her very own sewing machine. The gift wasn't just an object, it was a symbol of a new beginning. With Martha's guidance, Abigail learned to remake old dresses into stunning new creations, each one a reflection of her growing confidence and artistry. What had started as a way to pass the time slowly turned into a passion. By the time Abigail entered high school, her love for fashion had taken deep root. She founded a fashion club and began designing custom prom dresses for her classmates. Requests from neighboring schools began to pour in, and Abigail's reputation as a talented designer grew. "This is genuine talent," Martha said one day, as she examined Abigail's latest design, a dress with intricate lacework and a sleek silhouette. "I can say that with all the years of experience I have in the fashion world." At 16, Abigail took her first job at a local boutique. She handled product selection, displays, and customer service, but what she loved most was seeing the joy on her customers' faces when they found something perfect. It was more than just a job, it was a chance to be part of something special, to bring beauty into the lives of others. "I get to be part of the moments that matter to people," she said one day, her eyes sparkling with excitement. The sadness that once clouded her gaze had given way to a newfound sense of purpose. After high school, Abigail's journey took her to Parsons School of Design in New York, where she majored in fashion design and business. Thanks to Martha's industry connections, Abigail secured internships with top brands, gaining invaluable experience while still in school. The fast-paced world of New York was a far cry from the quiet mountains of Whistler, but Abigail embraced it with enthusiasm. She saw beauty everywhere, constantly sketching new ideas in her notebook. "The world is full of beauty waiting to be discovered," she often said, her sketchbook always close by as she dreamed up new designs. During her junior year at Parsons, Abigail received a startling message. A private investigator, hired years earlier by her parents' estate to search for her whereabouts, had uncovered a lead. There had been a sighting of Jonathan and Elizabeth in Mexico. But by then, Abigail had changed. She had grown. She had come to terms with the past and no longer sought to chase it. "I'm not chasing the past anymore," she told the investigator firmly, terminating the contract. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about her, her future, her dreams, her new family. After graduating, Abigail moved forward with purpose. Each step in her career became part of the foundation she was building. By 1995, at just 22, she opened her own store in a quiet alley in Soho. It was a bold step, but one that felt natural. Every dress she designed, every display she curated, was a tribute to the strength she had found within herself. Abigail Sterling was no longer the scared little girl who had fallen from the edge of a mountain. She was a designer, a businesswoman, and above all, someone who had finally discovered her worth. Starling, the name Abigail chose for her store, was a symbol of her strength, resilience, and transformation. It was also a subtle nod to the surname her father had left her, one she had once dreaded but had now reclaimed on her own terms. The grand opening was a triumph, and as Martha and Tom stood outside, tears streaming down their faces, Abigail knew her journey had come full circle. "You've done so well," Martha whispered, her voice full of pride. Abigail had always possessed an innate understanding of fashion, an eye for blending vintage elegance with modern sensibilities. Her designs, one-of-a-kind pieces with a timeless appeal, drew instant attention. Her dedication to attentive customer service and her ability to create unique experiences for each client only added to the allure. It didn't take long before word of her store spread. Celebrities, socialites, and fashion aficionados alike found their way to Sterling. By the time Abigail turned 25, she had opened a second store. At 27, a third one. At 28, her Beverly Hills location opened with a grand flourish. That year, her annual sales exceeded $10 million, and she was celebrated by Vogue and other prestigious fashion magazines. She had become an icon, a symbol of the new era of fashion. Fall 2031. At 36, Abigail stood at the heart of her Beverly Hills flagship store during its 5th anniversary party. The store on 328 Rodeo Drive glittered with champagne-colored decor and soft lighting from vintage chandeliers, creating an atmosphere of timeless elegance. Her rise to success had been nothing short of extraordinary. Dressed in a tailored black pantsuit, she draped a white cashmere stole, hand-knitted by Martha, over her shoulders. It was a gift, a constant reminder of the woman who had helped Abigail rebuild her life from the ground up. Her presence exuded confidence, grace, and a quiet power that had earned her the nickname Fashion's New Empress in the New York Times. As champagne glasses clinked and the melodies of jazz floated through the room, Abigail mingled with guests. Socialites, designers, and actors filled the space, all eager to celebrate her success. Amidst the crowd was Catherine Lawrence, once a socialite idol admired by Abigail's mother. Catherine was an unmistakable presence in the room, and when she saw Abigail, she beamed. "Miss Sterling, what a marvelous party," Catherine said with genuine admiration. "Your sense of style is truly exceptional." Abigail offered a graceful smile, but her eyes scanned the store, perfectly embodying her aesthetic vision. She was proud, but also at peace with what she had achieved. But then, just after 3 p.m., the doorbell chimed, signaling unexpected visitors. The couple that walked through the door was hardly a fitting match for the elegant crowd that had gathered. An elderly man in an ill-fitting suit and a woman whose once pristine elegance had faded into disheveled weariness. Jonathan and Elizabeth Sterling. Time had not been kind to them. Their faces, lined with deep wrinkles, told the story of 28 years of hardship. After fleeing from debt collectors to Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina, they had lived under false names, engaging in dubious business dealings that only led to their further ruin. But with the news of Abigail's success, they had come, hoping to manipulate her success into their own salvation. "My, what a lovely store," Elizabeth murmured, her voice tinged with a blend of nostalgia and envy as she admired the opulent interior. "Whose store is this?" Abigail watched them silently from behind the counter. A whirlwind of emotions churned in her chest, anger, sadness, and an odd sense of closure. Slowly, she approached them, her steps measured. "Do you remember me?" she asked. The couple froze, their eyes widening. It had been nearly 3 decades, but Abigail's presence was unmistakable. Abigail led them to the VIP room, her polite demeanor masking the storm that raged inside. She poured them champagne with a calm precision, her voice steady as she asked, "Do you remember that day?" Elizabeth's hands trembled as she clutched her glass. "I remember." Abigail's eyes were unwavering. "I still have the photographs from that camera," she continued, her words quiet but powerful. She pulled out a folder, and within it was evidence, proof of their fraudulent schemes and the many secrets they had tried to bury. The report from the private investigator Martha had commissioned years ago outlined their years on the run, the lies, the broken lives. "But I won't take this to the police," Abigail said, her voice measured, "because the life you've led, one devoid of true love, family, and peace, is punishment enough." The weight of her words hung in the air. Elizabeth broke down into sobs, while Jonathan covered his face in shame. Abigail stood still, her face calm, but her heart swelling with a complex mixture of emotions, anger, relief, and the finality of it all. "Please leave now," she said, her voice firm. "Never return to my life or my store. If you stay away, I won't use this evidence." The couple stumbled out of the store, their heads low, disappearing into the crowd of Rodeo Drive. Abigail stood by the window, watching their retreating figures until they vanished from view. Behind her, the quiet voice of Martha broke the silence. "Are you all right?" Abigail turned and found Martha and Tom standing there, their faces filled with concern. "I'm fine," Abigail said with a bright smile, the lightness in her expression in stark contrast to the gravity of the moment. "I have my real family now." She reached into the register drawer, her fingers brushing against the familiar shape of the old camera, the one from that fateful day. Holding it carefully, she whispered, "I've finally found my freedom." As the party continued into the night, the glow of Los Angeles's glittering lights shone like jewels through the windows. Wrapped in the warmth of Martha's stole and surrounded by the soft sounds of jazz, Abigail raised her glass in a quiet, resolute gesture. To new beginnings, she said softly, the weight of her past finally lifting as she embraced the life she had built on her own terms. And so, at last, Abigail Sterling had found the freedom she had always sought.